Good evening. Good evening. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. I am just getting everything set up and started. Oh, how did I screw that up? I'll screw that up at least once. 1 second. I'm trying to share out to people, and I always screw it up at least once, if not twice. I'm horrible at this. Get down, baby. And my dog is trying to climb on my lap as I am doing this. There. Please get some out. Hope everybody is doing great. I'm streaming on both TikTok and over on YouTube. If you are trying to ask questions and you can't get through here to ask questions, you can go over to YouTube and do so. Over on YouTube, it's the same channel and what a ord. Let me is the picture behind me flipped? It has been doing that a lot lately. Merry Solstice, Gong. That's what I was wondering. Okay, let me go ahead and flip it. It's been not that, Sarah. Not that, Sarah. It's been mirroring it wrong a lot lately, and I don't know why. So, but I don't know until somebody tells me, and I don't want to pop it up. So, I hope everybody is having a great evening. I'm going to go ahead and have some of these conversations tonight and go into a couple of things. We talked about this a bit before. Isn't he? He almost looks like Ragnar, except dark. Like he almost looks like Vikings, except dark. If you see him like sideways, he's got that kind of, I don't remember the name of that actor who plays Ragnar in Vikings, but he almost looks like that. But we're going to go ahead and go over some of these. I'll turn the comments off for a while, and then I'll turn the comments back on. I'm going to turn all comments off instead of just subscribers, but I will turn subscriber chats on later as I'm going back through. So we went live last Saturday, and it got me on a live bound until Wednesday for doing makeup with my child. My adult child, my 24-year-old child. We had everybody over for Christmas, and so she did my makeup, and it was, I have no clue why we got banned. It said bullying and harassment for me, and for her it said spreading disinformation, so who knows. And it took until Wednesday night when I was supposed to do a live, because I left for the holidays. And then I got back Wednesday. I was going to do a live. I ended up doing one Friday morning because it still wasn't. 1 second. All of my animals went inspecting something. What did you guys have over? It's like with children, when it's all quiet, you have to double check. All of my animals went and inspect something. So I got banned. I was on Friday morning, but I'm doing Friday mornings and Tuesday mornings and Sunday nights and Wednesday nights from now on, to do it on days that I'm best able to, basically, and to kind of give some form of a schedule. So these are a few of the most recent things that I've come across. Well, not most recent, but a few of the recent things that I've come across, and I thought they were really cool. There's a few more, I think, probably starting next week, we're going to go ahead and do it a little bit more. Like there's a few different Neanderthal things that I've come across recently that I want to focus on, and so we'll probably do that next week. Well, okay, we probably just do a couple mornings on this, and then we'll start into a night one on that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the comments, and I'll go ahead and get started, and we'll turn the comments back on so that everybody can ask questions later on. This just prevents distraction on my end, and makes it so It doesn't get trolly in here. It can be uncomfortable for some people when it gets really trolly. If you're on YouTube and you're seeing my hand in front of the screen, I apologize. I'm trying to put cameras side by side, so I'm looking at both cameras. TikTok won't let me live stream through my computer because I don't have like one of the codes that they want, probably because I'm on a live band and shit so often. So, just is. So, I'm going to go over a couple of different things that I've seen that really are kind of cool. Uh, with the top on this list, with Neanderthals going almost extinct twice before they went extinct. What I find really cool about this is we often have like that thought process that, oh, we're going to like have this apocalyptic event and we're going to go almost extinct, and then 20 of us are going to come back from the brink of annihilation and we're going to move forward and be the next great. And the thing is that we often think of ancient apocalypses. We often think of different apocalypses having happened. We often think of the apocalypse to come. Um, and I do believe that we have had great knowledge before that we have lost, though I don't believe that it was some master group. I think that everybody had great knowledge and advancement before. But I think that when we look at that and think that we're going to come back from this, you know, apocalyptic 20 people survived brink, I don't think that that's feasible. When we look at people like Neanderthals surviving apocalypse, or like the Taino people surviving the genocide that Columbus tried to commit upon them, taking them from 10 million to 10,000 in 2 years, right? 10,000 isn't in itself is not enough genetic diversity to maintain a population. You have to have outside genetic diversity, outside admixture, right? So when we look at that, we need to understand that we're not going to be 20 people making it back from a nuclear blast, right? Like that's just not how that's going to happen. It's going to have to be quite a bit more people making it back for us to get to that point. But it has happened in other species. It has happened in other species that environmental disaster or environmental things. Sorry, somebody tried to go. Sorry, it's not a live box for you to share. Sorry. That's my lecture hall. Thank you. When we're looking back at different species being able to survive climatic events, what we're looking at is different species being able to survive climatic events with larger groups or with an extended period of lack of genetic diversity afterwards, which then they have to get some admixture elsewhere to survive on, or they don't survive on at all, hence the Neanderthals. So when we're looking at the possibility of an extinction event with the Neanderthals, what we're looking at is that they're seeing that there might have been two. Now, what they're doing to do this is this new testing that they're doing, where in its Max Planck Institute, which again is where Svante Pablo comes out of, the man who developed polymerase chain reaction, the first to sequence ancient DNA, and the guy who just won the Nobel Peace Prize for this. When they're doing it, what they're doing is they have extracted DNA basically from the floor of the cave. So what they've done is found this way to test the soil itself and test DNA in the soil itself. This is this very new thing that's been like they've only been talking about it for the last 5 years. Like it's so new. I've only heard about it within the last couple years. They weren't even talking about it when I was in school. It's very, very new. And what it is it's basically like, we've talked before about when they're doing carbon 14 dating, they get like a tube of the soil and then they test the carbon 14 or the plant matter within that soil, or carbon matter. I don't think it always is plant, like I think it can be bone as well, but it can stone as well. I can't remember all of the carbon 14 processes. But they test that. With this, they're kind of doing something similar to my understanding. I'm not saying I think they're doing a tube of it. They might be. But what they're doing is they're testing They're testing the mitochondrial DNA from cave floors, but nuclear DNA previously available only from bones and teeth can be far more informative. It seems possible to extract nuclear DNA from dirt, and we have a lot of dirt in the archaeological sites. And so they are starting to extract nuclear DNA. Um, Now, to date, this gives us numbers of archaic humans that we've been able to extract ancient DNA from, and it includes 18 Neanderthals. So, out of 23 archaic humans that we've been able to extract ancient DNA from, 18 of those are Neanderthals. So, the rest of those are Denisovians that we've talked about before because we know there's like six fossils, seven fossils of Denisovian, right? So, when we're looking at that, they are looking at the DNA that they have there, and with the combination of the two, they are looking at um, expansion and contraction of genetic diversity. So, times when there's a lot of different women lending their mitochondrial DNA and a lot of different men lending their Y DNA, and times where there's a lot of different, or there's less people. So, less mitochondrial DNA and less Y DNA being put into the pool for creation of the next generation, right? And what they're talking about is that they thrived and they were very diverse in between these two almost extinction events. And then after the first one, they start mixing with Homo sapiens and Homo denisovians. And then after the second one is when they start being bred out, like they start disappearing from the fossil record. They're no longer a whole genomic sequence about 60,000 years. Because what they're saying is that the two events, um, let me see if I can pull. I had it and I have it up. I just have to figure out where the number is on the page because I looked at something else. And I believe it's 170 and 130,000 years ago. Um, but I want to 170,000 years ago and 100,000 years ago, I believe is what it is. Because in the interstitial, moist interglacial period, the interstitial of cold glacial periods at 130,000 years ago, you're seeing a thriving of genetic diversity. Now, when we look at that, and there's another find that's come out recently that's actually pretty cool that talks about the possibility that Homo sapiens Y DNA male lineage replaced Neanderthals Y DNA a couple 100,000 years prior to Neanderthals and Homo sapiens breeding again. So, like two breeding periods, two mixing periods. So, what it's talking about in this second one is that there's a divergence of our lineages 600,000 years ago when Homo neanderthalis comes into play. And then, of course, we don't come into play about until about 300,000 years ago. Oh, that's the wrong one. That is not the one I was looking for. I'm like, this does not have the information I want. But what it's talking about is when they are looking at a replacement of the Y DNA in Neanderthals, they're looking at Neanderthal Y DNA being replaced about like 260,000 years ago in an early travel out of Africa into the Levant area. And then Neanderthals going back up into Europe in that interstitial glacial period. And the prior so the belief is that the Y DNA that was within Neanderthals at that time dies out. So the group of Homo sapiens that contribute that Y DNA and eventually replace Neanderthal Y DNA in Neanderthals dies out. And then the next group of Homo sapiens that comes out of Africa is the group that everybody else is descended from. And that's the group that mixes in the Levant area with Neanderthals for 100,000 years. Okay. So what they're stating is that this earlier group goes up and is not again out of the Levant area, really up past that, kind of Caucasus Mountain region, I guess, maybe a little bit north, but not really up past in that area. And they're mixing there. And the Neanderthals are going back up into Europe as the glaciation recedes and Europe becomes this moist interstitial period again. And then that group is gone. And then the next group comes out. And that's where we get the Neanderthal Y DNA being a Homo sapien Y DNA, and why we're not seeing Neanderthal Y DNA in us, and why we're not seeing Neanderthal Y DNA in the Neanderthals that we have sequenced. Because of those 18 that we have sequenced, all have been female, really. We don't have a Neanderthal Y DNA at this point. And so this tells us that we're looking at not just this lack of genetic diversity, but a couple of times of interbreeding that kind of changes and morphs who Neanderthal is, even before they meet the last of us coming out of Africa into the Levant area and mixing with them. So it's kind of a really interesting thought process when you can look at it. It not only can tell us how you can recover from an almost extinction event, right? But it also gives us a lot of information on our own cycle, right? On how we might come into play as we kind of drive ourselves into this extinction event that we're driving ourselves into right now if we don't do some serious shit recovery on it, right? Um, so that's a really interesting one. I'm going to go ahead and turn comments on, which I'll do pretty much after each one of these things that I go over so everybody can have a conversation. We just went over Neanderthal almost going extinct twice before they did, and a couple other interesting things within it. So if your questions are on the next three topics, wait, you might have them answered before you ask them. And let's try and leave them to the first one. And I'll turn them back off before we get into the next. Please feel free to comment. I do ask that if you're asking me a question, you at me so that I know. I also ask, well, I don't ask. This is an anti-race environment. We don't do racism in here. Race theory has been debunked. We're not going to fuck with race theory. I have explained in several things why race theory has been debunked. We'll actually probably get into it at some point in this live. And I don't do racism. I also don't do homophobia. I don't do gender phobia. If you want to be like that, you can take it somewhere else. I would posit that that is not human. It's not human nature to others. And you're just contributing to the 1% taking from you when you act like that. So cheers on you. So Cheddarman is actually okay, so in the last year, we pushed this back. We've had 2 new finds, but he was the oldest find that we had in Britain. And his direct descendant, 300 generations later, is actually living within a mile of where he was found. He was part of a group of people that looked like him. And it's pretty much known at this point that Europe was settled by dark-skinned people with blue eyes, that the lighter eyes came across earlier, and then it took a lot longer time for the lighter skin to come across. Neanderthal are as human as anything because they're Homo neanderthalis, and Homo means human. Every root of science that we have on this planet today comes from Homo erectus. So, we were extremely advanced as different human species before our human species. Our advancement just lived in concert with the world around it instead of stole from. And exploited the world around it. And that's why it didn't leave a lot of mark. It was never intended to leave a lot of mark. This need to leave a mark is a little mighty white, but you know. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Just want to make sure. I do like so for me, um, evidence is important, right? We should still believe like indigenous histories and oral histories are of equal importance as well. To me, they're of higher importance than like written histories because they're not propaganda and they have a tendency to be more correct. Um, but you know, numbers and tools that we have learned to understand things give as much truth and weight as possible until we change them. So as long as they're the ones that we're using, they're the best to use, right? There is every such thing as indigenous. We're all indigenous to somewhere. There's indigenous people across the globe living indigenous ways today, across the globe, across the globe, across the globe, every corner. Innu people in Japan, the Sami, you know, we've got people in Bolivia, we've got Turtle Island indigenous people in North America, we've got different groups in Africa, we've got groups in India, Senginelese, like there are indigenous groups across the fucking globe living indigenous ways. You don't want them to be indigenous because it puts you the fuck out because you think in a white man's way instead of thinking in an indigenous thought process, which doesn't put you out. You're afraid that people are going to treat you like you've treated people. Indigenous does not mean, okay, so Indian means India. Turtle Island indigenous people are indigenous to Turtle Island. Australians are indigenous to Australia, Australian indigenous people. Um, and that's actually where science first used terms indigenous actually was for Australian indigenous people. And it wasn't until later that it starts to become a more acknowledgement of what indigeneity truly is, which is a generations and millennia connection with the land and growing in a land and developing a language for a land and understanding every aspect of a land and living in concert with the land and tending a land and being a part of a land, which is truly a global thing before Christian colonization. I've actually stated race isn't real already. Okay. Um, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn these on to subscriber only so we can go through a couple of these. I don't think that many of these are really actual questions. Oh, I have 3 cats actually. And I have a nesting partner and I have a couple other partners, you know, probably get laid more than you do. But probably get more. I probably get more girls than you do too. Just saying, just saying. So I'm hung a little bit better. But How that. Anyway, so let's go ahead and go through this. It seems a little trolly, so I'll probably, you know, tell the trolls. Anyways, what's the next extinction that we're nearing that you speak of? So often it was called the sixth mass extinction that's upcoming, but now it's being touted as the seventh mass extinction, as they found that when trees developed roots, they actually caused the first mass extinction. Isn't that kind of cool? When they developed roots and those roots started to decay, they flooded the oceans with chemicals and depleted them of water of oxygen. And so it depleted the oxygen in the atmosphere as well. And it caused a mass extinction. This is actually probably, well, not the trees, but lack of oxygen that will cause the next mass extinction that is coming up. And that is if we don't change the destruction that we're causing on the planet currently, which we're not naturally inclined to. This has to do with people trying to maintain control over you, and not with your needs. And I would have to say that they're not doing it very kindly, and you're probably as miserable as everybody else is. And there's a better way. Um, but that's the extinction that I'm talking about. Climate change is natural. The cycles of the climate that happen are natural. Climate destruction is something that we're causing currently, and we've been causing for about 10,000 years currently. We see the start of this with Western agriculture, which really causes climate destruction. If life needs warmth and water, where do all species come from? From the water, the warmth that's there. Um, I mean, I'm not sure if they've actually decided which is the original common ancestor of all of us, because we all share a common ancestor, all the species on this planet. But I do know that, there is a common ancestor, and that it all starts in water and it all starts in warmth. The message here is anthropology and archaeology. Um, I don't believe education should be behind a $40,000 a year paywall, or gate kept by really large language. So I teach. I have a couple of degrees. I use them for, benefit of everybody. What date did Homo sapiens settle in different parts of Europe? So the current understanding is that the oldest Homo sapiens settlements in Europe are 54,000 years old in France. Um, and as you go upward on Eurasia, the continent of Eurasia by latitude, you get further settlement. What it is that the end of the last ice age starts at about 50,000 years ago. England, Britain starts clearing about 27,000 years ago, and northern England and Ireland are not cleared until about 8,000 years ago. 8 to 6,000 years ago is the clearing of Scandinavia. Maybe it's 7,000 years ago. I think the newest, oldest finds in Scandinavia are 7,000 years ago. And so we're seeing that the very northern latitude isn't really cleared until about 7,000 years ago. And so it's not until those time periods, excuse me, I've got a lot of gas tonight, right? Uh, it's not until we see the ice clearing that we see Homo sapiens moving into these regions. We do see other people that were in these regions before, but the people that are in these regions before are all Neanderthal, Denisovian, or Homo erectus. Propaganda is lies used to manipulate you into hating somebody else so you don't see your government is trying to kill you. That is what propaganda is. I am not propaganda. I'm trying to tell you to wake the fuck up. Your government's harming you, not everybody else. It's not the immigrants. It's not the person down the street. It's not your brothers. It is the fucking government. It's not all I'm here to tell you, but that was the conversation when we were talking. And propaganda is a governmental tool to manipulate you to hate something other than their nasty actions towards you so that they can maintain power and control. Buy in, for all means, buy in, but I'm not going to, and I'm not going to espouse it or, buy into your buy in. 5KYA means 5,000 years ago. Thank you, Jackie. Moon, the second word in that is considered a slur. We try not to use it anymore, just because. Um, Race is not real. We've talked about that several times within here. Race is a colonial construct used to justify atrocity. Conquering did not happen all over the world. There are many places that still are not conquered. And, when somebody comes in and beats the holy fuck out of you and occupies your home and tries to convert you into their thought process, you may end up doing something like Stockholm syndrome even. This is called occupation. This is called imprisonment. It's not called conquering. An abusive husband doesn't conquer. An abusive father doesn't conquer. And when you use deceit and deception and hate against people who do not have those qualities within them, documented by you, do not have those qualities in them, then you are the asshole. Long and short, long and the short. And get over what? It's really, really hard to get over things as they're happening. People are being killed in our streets. What the fuck am I supposed to get over? It has to have stopped to get over it. And it still hasn't. So what am I supposed to get over? Australians are not from Europe, Max. You need to check yourself. We know Chatterman's skin color because of the DNA testing and the genetics. With skin color, what happens is there's a set of different alleles in the genes, in the gene for the melanin content in your skin, a set of different alleles, markers, genetic markers, that uh, will rate what the color and the tone of your skin is, how much presence of melanin you have in your skin. And they have been able to determine what the color of Cheddarman's skin color was. And the genetic markers and alleles are the same that you see in the darkest dark within the sub-Saharan continent of Africa. And so that's what they go with Cheddarman skin, because that is what the genetic markers for his skin color state. Knocker, my ideas worked for us for 2.5 million years. Your ideas have destroyed us in 10,000, just stating. 2.5 million years, my ideas have worked for humanity. Your ideas destroyed us in under 10,000, and we will be the first species to cause its own mass extinction. So my ideas are correct, and your ideas are moronic and got us into this state. Just stating. And I do like my cats more than I like most humans, just like I like my dogs more than I like most humans, just because most humans seem to have bought into the capitalistic system that tells them that exploitation is the key to everything, including their love life. And when you think that exploiting your spouse is okay, I have problems. I would rather like my cats. Thank you for the feathers. Thank you, Jack, for subscribing. I got my degree in anthropology, the subfield of archaeology, and my degree is from Portland State. Oh, archaeology. Uh, so anthropology is the main, and then there's several subfields. Archaeology is a subfield that I'm in, and then the focus that I have is paleoanthropology and Europe pre-Christian colonization. And what I think we should do is land back. I think that we return indigenous tending and governance of the land to indigenous people, because indigenous people understand what the land needs to be able to provide all the things that we need. Indigenous people fed when the Europeans got to Turtle Island. Turtle Island was documented by the Europeans as a tended garden, coast to coast, north to south, east to west. All of the Turtle Islands were documented as tended gardens. North America alone fed 80 million people as a tended garden. 80 million people in abundance. And it's documented in abundance. It's documented by the Europeans who were coming in to destroy it, that it was abundance. So we absolutely have what we need if we stop destroying the world around us and start working in concert with it as we are supposed to, before we decided that we were some special glorious being that was given this as a gift to destroy. I don't know why we always end up back here, though. I am really ready and willing to always discuss it. We do always seem to end up back here, though. So let's go on to the next topic because I found this one to be really frigging just really interesting. So I do know that there is some evidence and thought process that Neanderthals might have had some tending of raptors. There's not a thought process that they raised raptors, but there might have been a thought process that they had a tending of raptors, um, or that they hunted raptors, because of the fact that they have a penchant for liking raptor talons and feathers in their self decoration that we see. But we see that indigenous Australians actually at 18,000 years ago were gathering and keeping cassowary eggs and incubating them. Now we see that they were incubating them for a couple of different reasons. There is a delicacy where an egg is almost completely developed, the baby within was almost completely developed, and you cook that egg, right? And then that in and of itself is a delicacy that you eat. But we also see, and we see that this is happening here because of the presence of fire on the stones, like of being in the fire, of being cooked, not on the stones. I'm sorry, we talk about fire cracked rock and my head went sideways. On the shell, on the shell of cassowary eggs in this find. And so the presence of cassowary eggs being cooked, but we also see the presence of cassowary egg shells that do not have presence of fire on them, which shows that they were actually hatched, and shows that they were actually incubated to a point of being able to keep and raise these chicks. Um, I've put this up along with the other ones, though the Europe was mainly black, is several different articles you're gonna have to scroll through. But, the other ones are all up on the link tree in my bio. Uh, but this one is really cool because it talks about the balutes, which are the fertilized eggs that are cooked and eaten when the embryo is developing. But it also talks about, what are the different things that could have been done with the umber eggshells that were hatched and the cassowary chicks imprinting on humans. And it also talks about the danger of cassowaries and the ability of cassowaries to actually be used in hunting or as a defense mechanism. And what we're looking at is archaeological sites in New Guinea that date to 6 to 18,000 years ago, back into the late Pleistocene era. I think that this is really cool in the fact that it shows this very early possibility of how we get to the point that we domesticate wolves and cats and cattle and goats and sheep, right? Because what we're looking at is a site that if it dates back to 18,000 years ago and they are hatching these out to raise them and have the birds actually imprint on them as part of their community to be used as a hunter or defense mechanism within the community, that what we're looking at is actually 18,000 years of domestication of animals, which puts us back 10,000 years before the domestication of animals that we're currently tracking, because currently we believe that the first domestication of animals is 10,000 years ago. Um, we believe that the first domestication of animals is cattle in West Africa, and or goats in West Africa and cattle in Europe. No, cattle in West Africa and goats in Europe, one way or the other, but one of each. Um, and we do see that one is in Western Europe and one is in Western Africa. We also see that this is the start of lactase tolerance for groups of people, and that these are the two groups of people that lactase tolerance people come out of. Uh, so this would put that back another 10,000 years, 8,000 years, which really, I mean, got to leave it to the indigenous Australians. They like to do things first. They're really good at that, right? And it's a really cool thought process that we can actually see a different a different reasoning, right? A different thought process in this, right? So if we're looking at something that is 10,000 or 18,000 years, and we're looking at something that is, raising them so that you can have that defense mechanism, or so that you can have the uh, hunting mechanism, what you're looking at is the understanding of what these birds can do for you. And then you're looking at, again, as we talk so often, this early science. Science is, again, I observe it in nature, observe, sorry, my words tonight. And I have a hypothesis or an idea of what my observation might mean. I predict it. So if my hypothesis is, um, hatching birds imprint on the mother, then my prediction might be, well, maybe if I can have them look at me as the mother, they'll imprint on me, right? Um, and so then my next move is going to be my testing phase, right? Which is going to be the phase in which I incubate a few eggs and have them hatch out. Again, as we talk about when we're looking at early stages of things, we're not going to see these things happen automatically. It's going to take quite a bit of testing and time. We took, 1.5 million years to get from fire to here, right? To get from fire to phone, we took 1.5 million years, and we needed fire to get to phone, right? And so when we look at it in that manner and in that way, we can absolutely see that it's going to take a hot minute to get to that point where you're able to understand. Thank you for your first gift. I love those. That you're able to understand and see exactly what it is that you need to do to hatch out these eggs, let alone what it is that you need to do to imprint and how it is that you're going to feed this bird, right? Like, how are you going to feed this nestling? Um, and so what we absolutely see, again, just like we constantly see in all spaces across the globe, science, indigenous science, right? We see that indigenous science is around and is absolutely able to give us all the things that we have now, for thousands and thousands of years pre its stomp out by Christianity in Europe in 400. But this really pushes back our idea of the husbandry of animals for about 8,000 years. And it really gives us a new understanding of some of our earliest reasons for that. Hey, Harris, some of our earliest reasons for domestication of animals. This doesn't look so far like it's a breeding thing, but I'm not sure if you would really breed cassowaries anyways. Like, birds to breed are a little bit difficult. It'd be a little bit easier to grab eggs and imprint them than to try and keep a fully grown adult cassowary all the time, right? So you might see, but you might also see that it becomes something that's breeding, right? After, again, you select for, ones who are more likely to be friendly, more likely to be compatible, right? I'm going to go ahead and open it up for comments. Earlier it was very trolly. We will absolutely shut it down when it gets like that again, and I'll go ahead and answer questions again. Um, I don't really appreciate the trolley shit, but whatever, be you. Um, just maybe learn. That's all I ask. Maybe learn. Happy Yule. Have a good one, Kylie. How are you doing? I actually I did mine early with the kids. And so I'm actually not doing really much of anything today. I played Sims today and did some housework because I needed to. But otherwise, I'm not doing a whole hell of a lot for the weekend. Um, I am probably going to, I think, put together really soon and do a live on some of the latest Neanderthal stuff that we've found, because there have been some really interesting Neanderthal finds that have come across over the last few. Oh, COVID for Yule is not the way anybody wants to go. I'm so sorry. I hope you're feeling okay. It's not the greatest. Fourth day of solstice. I think solstice this year was like on the Like, it wasn't even on the 21st this year, I think, in my hemisphere. I think it was, like, on the 19th. It kind of changes around. But I love that we look at it in a different way now that we're looking at the different phases of solstice and kind of returning it to what it was, right? Um, I think lactose tolerance is high among the Irish just because we're looking at that northeast no, Northwest European population, and that Northwest European population is one of the 2 populations well, the Celtic population is one of the 2 populations that really gives us that, the early, husbandry of milk-bearing animals. Um, we're looking at groups of people that because the Celts and the Germanics actually did a lot of migrating for 10,000 years to that area, really. And, in that migrating of moving here and coming back or, different cultures moving in and stuff like that, you're seeing, really a very fluid and intermixed society, and you're also seeing really a society that, becomes almost I mean, you definitely see differences in tribal spaces, especially up, until later on and things like that, but becomes almost a genetic intermix for such a long period of time. Chili Billy, if nobody talks about race, there is no racism. That's absolutely incorrect because unfortunately, racism is built into our structure and into our system. And if nobody talks about it, then it's absolutely allowed to flourish within our structure and with our system. Silence is violence on every level. Silence is violence. You're welcome, Lay. And when we don't talk about the violence that's going on and we remain silent about the violence that's going on, we allow it to happen. We become complicit. We become a part of the evil. We become a part of the hate and a part of the problem. The only way to end racism is to A, acknowledge the fact that race does not exist. Culture, ethnicity, which is based on culture and heritage, exists, but race does not exist. It is a colonial construct. Material plan in terms of additional info. I'm not sure, Gong. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking of me. Are you asking, like, do I have plans for more concrete info? Or, I'm not sure. I'm not taking okay. Yes, there is work for more concrete stuff. There is work, and there has been, for a while, there is so I've been writing a children's book, and I'm writing a book. I'm writing a couple, and I'm also working on, so I'm working on narrowing down, or getting a website in the works that will actually give bibliography in a better way than the link tree, right? But I'm also working on creating, videos that are actually, like content related, and different series of videos. It's really it's a fight with my mental health, unfortunately. And so I'm working on a lot of it, but it's also, a lot of it becomes my mental health telling, just problems within my mental health. But I do have a few things that are in the work. Um, well, and it's really I do too much shadow work, honestly. I do a lot of shadow work and it's really becomes to the point where it's just bad. And I'm to a point where I'm kind of done for a while. I'm doing some stuff right now. This work that I'm doing right now is kind of the last I think I'm going to be doing mentally for a while. And then I'm going to work on some other stuff for a hot minute so that I can get some of this other stuff out. But I really right now it's fighting my ADD and my, lack of skill in computer usage and technological usage. Um, as well as trying to figure out the best ways to do a few things. Like, okay, so a book's a really cool idea, and I'd love to put out a book, but book's a lot of effort that a lot of people don't read anymore, right? Not a lot of people read anymore. A lot of people find that they garner more knowledge out of a 10 to 15-minute video than they do out of a book, and so they're more capable of listening to that while doing something else, right? Yeah, right. Well, and that's why I'm trying to bring into, this other stuff as well, right? So I was focused on Erectus for a hot minute with stuff because of the fact that it was still bringing people in, right? But it doesn't have the bringing in anymore, and that's why I'm focusing on other things. So what I'm going to be doing is, I'm just gonna spend the next few weeks just going over different things. I've got a whole list of, bookmarks, and I'm just gonna start bringing in some of these bookmarks and discussing the bookmarks and what they mean and what this means for different things within the archaeological community and within the historical community, if that makes sense. Which is what this is that kind of move away into these new articles and these new finds. Awesome extra. I'm not. I'm in Oregon. Say again about racism and culture, Eddie. Is that what you're asking me? So the person had stated that the only way to stop racism was to stop talking about racism. And my statement in return was that silence is violence. If first of all, racism is structural, and so if we're ignoring the racism within the structure, it's not going to go away. It's still there. It's just going to be ignored. Um, and that race does not exist. Culture exists, but race has been disproven. It's a colonial construct that was used to justify atrocity. Yeah, I really would. Well, and I have some offer some help, but I'd like to learn because I wouldn't want to expect other people to be doing stuff for me. It's hard for me to expect other people to do stuff for me. Absolutely, Eddie. Um, but I am actually, and I was thinking of quite a few today. I am actually working on making video lists now that I have the video list, and we're going into a few different things so that it's not just the lives, but that a lot of the information is going into actual lists so that you can go and look at early hominins or go and look at Western agriculture and changes and stuff like that. Well, doser, that feels very called out. I bet you that is my ADD talking. Okay, I'll try. I'll work on it. I'll work on it. Thank you. You're probably right. I don't think I've ever looked at it like that, but you're probably right. Yeah. I always think it's just the fact that I always have to uh, I have, like, mother issues, and perfection issues. I always figured it was that. Well, that and I always feel like I don't want people to feel like I have a history of people telling me I ask too much, so I don't wanna, make people feel like I'm asking a lot. Not like I think that history has anything to do with me really asking too much. I'm sure that it really has to do with the fact that they didn't feel I should ask anything of them while they were asking a lot of me, but, it took me a lot of time to get to that point too. Well, I think that those aren't mutually exclusive though, Eddie, and I probably do. I don't know. I don't think I've ever had my IQ tested. And I would think that my IQ, from what I've seen of IQ tests, would probably not test out very high because I don't do pattern recognition very well and I don't fit inside boxes very well. And so most IQ tests are very mathematical and pattern recognition, numerically orientated, and I don't work very well within that too, right? Yeah, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like, I think that you can have ADD and be high IQ. And I don't think that, it's one or the other. I think that it can Pacific. Oh, wow. I never thought of that at E. User, I'm not sure who Sand people are. And the Khoisan people are a South African population. They didn't inhabit Egypt, to my knowledge. The Egyptian people, I would assume, have been there for so that portion of the globe is like one of the first and longest portions of longest term occupation. Like Homo habilis was along the Nile and Homo erectus was along the Nile. And so I'm pretty sure Egyptians have been there since Homo sapiens arrived there 300,000 years or shortly after Homo sapiens started, coming up, because it's also in the area of the Levant where you see, like it's shortly like slightly below the Levant. It's one of those areas that was traveled through so much. How has new technology learned to say, for instance, how did Homo sapiens learn to use fire? So Homo sapiens probably got their knowledge of how to use fire from Homo erectus, the species that we came from, because Homo erectus had fire. And so as a parent teaches its child fire, the parent Homo erectus teaches the child Homo sapien fire. Sand people. Sand people, cassowaries are birds, Dominique. Um, I don't I don't think I hyperfocus. I think I multifocus more than anything else. I can hyperfocus, but typically it's hyperfocus in shit, like in my head. Like I can sometimes hyperfocus on things, but typically it's more in my head. I have a brain that just never stops. Like it goes 1,000 places in a minute. Like I can start in one area and I end up not even knowing where the fuck I started by the time I ended. Um, typically. Absolutely. So, you would see with Homo erectus. So, I've talked about before the early science, right? Science is I observe and then I have a hypothesis or I think of what my observation might mean. So, if you're looking at fire, Homo sapien or Homo erectus might have observed lightning hitting a tree with a cat in it and that the cooked cat smelled really good and tasted really good, right? And so they might have observed that they could cook food with fire. So now they know why they might want to use fire, but now they have to figure out how to keep fire because you can't make lightning strike in the same place twice, anyways, right? Though I think it probably can. I might be wrong on the. Anyway, so you observe this and then you go, okay, so I have this log and it's still kind of on fire. Maybe I can take this back to my camp and I can keep it, right? And so I take it back to my camp. And that's my prediction. Maybe I can take it back to my camp and I can keep it. And so now I'm going to test it. How do I keep it in my camp? So the first time that, yeah, maybe it can. The first time that I test it, maybe like I don't understand to feed it, and so it dies. So the next time I see, fire from something in nature, whether it's a lightning strike or something else might have happened, right? The next time I bring that log back, and I know to feed it, but I can't carry it. I can't transport it. So now I have to figure out how to transport it. And so now I might take a coal from the fire and I know I have to feed it because otherwise it dies. So maybe I put tinder around that coal, but it burns up all that tinder really, really quick. So it doesn't keep it. So maybe next time I put tinder around that coal and then I put wet tinder around that tinder. So now I've created kind of a balance, and so it keeps going a little bit, but it doesn't go completely. But maybe I put it in a box, or not a box, but like I put it in a container that I've made and it seals, and now it has no air, and so it dies. So the next time, maybe it works with the dry tinder and it works with the wet tinder, but it doesn't work sealed in the box or the container. So now I have to make sure there's a little bit of air. So all of these steps are learning how to tend and husband and control fire, and they're all science. Every little step that I'm taking is a little test. Every test I'm doing, if it works, moves me into a theory. Once it's worked, it becomes a theory. So once I get to the point that I can keep the coal inside the tinder, then this has become my theory and I keep it. But when that starts failing or something else works better, then the testing, that new test, because every time I redo it, every time I put it in there, it's another test, right? Once that test starts failing, I have to find a different test. It's all these tiny little experimentations that get us to the science of fire. Gordon Ramsay. And cooking with lightning is not so convenient. It might be ADHD, Harris. I'm not sure. They didn't really define it. They just said, "Yeah, you've got it." I said, "I think I might be ADD." And they did a test and they said, "Yeah, it sounds like you're ADD." And I said, "That sounds right. So how do we fix this?" And it wasn't like I need to fix that. I was ruminating a lot and I ruminate really bad. And I'm to a point where I'm no longer ruminating, which I needed because I was ruminating. I could get out of the back, the past. So I got told I needed to put some things on t-shirts. And so I'm putting on a t-shirt. It's past tripping, future tripping, it's all tripping. I had to stop past tripping because I past trip a lot instead of future tripping. I'd kind of rather future trip. But it could be ADHD instead of ADD, absolutely. So moving on to women in the early church, and I'll go ahead and leave comments on because it seems like the trolls have departed, at least for now. Um, when we're looking at women in the early church, so when we're looking at women in early everywhere, right? What we're seeing is that women are leaders across the board. We see that there are 17 queens in the role of kings of Egyptian kings, right? We see that the greatest warrior that we've ever found in Scandinavia was a female. The greatest general, the top of the rank that we've ever found in Scandinavia was female. We see that the Scythian warriors have turned out to be, in fact, female. We see that Neanderthals that were thought to be males are in fact female. We see that most of the fighters throughout history are in fact female, right? We see that there is not this idea of gender and this idea that women are weaker throughout history until we get to what we often talk about with the toxic Greek patriarchy coming in, where we find a space where they would rather be intimate with their young male mentors than be intimate with women. And so they have to find a way to make intimacy with their young male lovers healthy and intimacy with women unhealthy. And so they turn women into this lesser, right? And when we see this happening, we see this translate later on when Rome ends up deciding to appropriate one of the people that they were killing's religion, as he was trying to, you know, get his people to stop allowing them to appropriate his religion. Um, he His religion in turn is used as something to kind of subdue an entire culture and turn a culture that is polytheistic and poly rulers into a singular deity and a singular ruler. And in this, what we see is that the cultures in this space and in this time, with the exception of Rome, because Greece has died out and Rome has taken over Greece's thought processes and ideas, because Rome is the great appropriator. Rome is great for its cultural appropriation. We see that as Rome is conquering pretty much all of Eurasia, well, all of Western Eurasia, and some of the Middle East of Eurasia, we see that they are stamping out spaces where women are in power. But when it becomes the church going into spaces, we see that we have to stop this stamp out of women being in power, because to move women into these spaces through the church is easier. We also see that the church at this time is mainly a slaves religion and mainly a religion of women. And the reasoning behind this is because when Constantine decides to appropriate this religion so that he can control and change his population from a triumvirate to a singular ruler, that he is trying to control the masses. He's trying to control the slaves and he's trying to control the women, women being lesser creatures in this society, right? Um, oh, yeah, the light reflects a lot on my glasses. I'm sorry. But we see that in this movement forward and in this need to create a space in which women are lesser so that men can dominate, this religion coming in gives women this belief that it's going to be okay in the end. And so Christianity in its infancy is very much this submissive, passive religion, even though it wasn't meant to be intentionally. Like Christ was not a submissive and passive person. Uh, he was a loving person, but loving and pacifism do not go hand in hand. Hello, DeCray. Um, and it is absolutely this need to control slaves and to control women in the early church that gives women and slaves power within the early church. So this latest find that we're seeing is really cool because it is a grave that once belongs to a dark age female church leader. And what we're looking at is a grave from, well, I think that their math is off because on one area this says 1400-year-old grave, but I thought at one area that they were saying, yeah. So their math is off. They're saying that it's a 1400-year-old grave, but they're also saying that it's in 630 CE to 670 CE in England, where pagan and Christian beliefs are intermingling. And if 14, no, maybe their math is right. Maybe my math is off, but we've discussed that one before. It's usually off. So their math is right. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and show you. So this is a necklace that we're seeing. And I love this because what this shows is we're seeing women of high rank within the early church. This is the non-recreated of it. And then this is the recreation of it. We're also seeing, I'm using this one because it's got a lot of pictures. This is a cross that is buried with her that they have not been able to pull out yet. But this is the LiDAR of it. And there's these interesting Celtic faces in here. I'm going to go ahead and flip this back. So what we're seeing with this is a woman who is in this mix of pagan and Christian England. So this is in England, I think. Let me double check where it's at. Yes, in Britain. This is in Britain. And what we're seeing is that this is during a time when most of Britain is still very pagan. What we're seeing is that Rome leaves Britain in 400 Common Era. And after Rome leaves Britain in 400 Common Era, we see the Anglo-Saxons moving in. And the reason that we see the Angles and the Saxons, this is two separate tribes, in fact. The reason that we see the Angles and the Saxons moving in is because the Romans are kind of driving them out of their space. The Romans are killing them in their space. And so they're kind of forcing them to move further into different spaces. And in this force to move further into different spaces, the space that they choose to move into is Britain. When they're moving into Britain and they're taking over Britain, they're still very pagan. And you in fact see that the pagan Germanic gods of Woden and Donner, Woden being Odin and Donner being Thor, become a part of the British landscape. And then after you see these gods becoming a part of the British landscape, you have a couple hundred years of this intermingling of the two sets of gods in the British landscape before you have Christianity start to coming in. Because again, what we're seeing is that Rome has been has left Britain because it's trying to solidify its borders again, because its borders have lost their solidity because of internal strife. And Constantine, this is the point that we're seeing this fight of the triumvirate all within this same period. You're also seeing a lot of emperors coming and going in this period. And in this whole mix, what we're seeing is that women are really a part of that movement and slaves are really a part of that movement. We see this actually when we're looking at St. Patrick, when we talk a lot about St. Patrick, because what we see with St. Patrick is actually a slave who has been stolen and converted because early Christianity is a slave's religion. Again, because early Christianity seeking to teach meekness and mildness because it's looking to be a control factor for its first benefactor, state religion, right? As it becomes its first state religion. And you see the Council of Nicaea used to create that happening. Oh, yeah. So when we're seeing women as such this major part of the early Christian church, this is in fact pretty natural, because what we're looking at is a time and a space where women are thought of as leaders anyways, going into spaces where women are thought of as leaders anyways in a religion that is almost specifically for women or slaves, because it is teaching meekness. And so that's where we're getting that. Yes, because it's not a she. This is Cheddarman behind me. And that's why, yeah, this is Cheddarman. Cheddarman is English, British. Cheddarman is 10,000 years old, and Cheddarman's direct descendant lives a mile from where Cheddarman was found, in fact, which I find just absolutely stunningly funny. That's the best part to me, is that his direct descendant is like 300 generations down, a mile away from where he is. And actually about 10% of European population is descended from the group of people that Cheddarman came from or was a part of. The next one that we're going to talk about today was the one that was brought up a lot earlier and tends to get a lot of people, I guess. And this is Europe being Black until about 5,000 years ago. Now, again, this is mainly, you're going to still see some instances of light skin within the population. You're going to see that about 5,000 years ago is when you see the population becoming predominantly, or not predominantly, but going to about 50% of light skin. Up until this time period, what you're looking at is a population that is less than 50% light skinned. As you're looking at this movement into Europe, of this population, you're seeing that the lighter eyes actually come into play before the lighter skin comes into play, which makes total sense because of the fact that the lighter eyes are a low light adaptation, just like the lighter skin is, but you can get vitamin D from plants and animals around you. You can't get light protection from plants and animals around you with the sunlight with your eyes. And low light eyes are absolutely needed when you're fighting predators in a low light environment. So the blue eyes and the green eyes are coming from, we believe, an intermix with Neanderthals, but it's also something that we know are within the species. So like we know that light skin is 900,000 years old. It goes back to Homo erectus. Um, but with the light eyes, what we're seeing is that when Homo erectus, as Homo heidelbergensis, um, speciates into Neanderthal in Europe, they speciate with light eyes as a dominant gene within the species. And the reason that they speciate with light eyes as a dominant gene within the species is because the species itself is in a low light environment, and light eyes are helpful for a low light environment. But if you take light eyes into a high light environment, you'll get headaches. You'll end up squinting a lot. It's very hard to see. So we see that Neanderthals speciate with light eyes because it helps them within their low light environment that they're speciating in. And we think that they gave this as a predominant gene or as a dominant gene within Homo sapiens when they mixed with Homo sapiens. Now, Homo sapiens would have already had it as a recessive gene from their speciation from Homo erectus, who also has the gene from it, which is how Homo neanderthal gets it, right? But what we see is that um, that speciation or that bringing it to the forefront uh, creates the greater ability to have it basically for that low light environment. To our knowledge, Homo sapien, like Homo erectus, speciates with dark skin, dark eyes, because of the highlight environment, and also with forest sea hair because of the highlight environment that they're in when they speciate. I don't think his face is depicted as being lumpy. I think that's just kind of like scarred and smiling. I think that what they've done is done a reconstruction of the skull itself, if they have the skull. I think they do, of Cheddar Man. I can actually go to Kinnis and see if they have the actual why this reconstruction. Looks like that. This is a Kinnis image, and Kinnis is in the link tree in my bio. I think so they've got a 3D of the skull. Yeah, that's why. So the skull itself, let me give you a view of what the 3D rendition of his skull looks like. So this is the 3D rendition they have of his skull. And if you look here, you'll see that there's kind of this indenture here. And they're probably deciding that it was a because of, so this looks like they think that it's a remodel, right? Which means that the bone has regrown after an injury, which means that he probably had an injury to the face and then lived, and that's why the face looks like it's all lumpy, is because there was an injury, and so this is what he would have looked like due to living through that injury. Still working over there. I mean, so we all started out very dark. Homo sapiens starts out very dark of skin. And the reason being is that, well, there's not a singular space in South Africa that we all originate in. It's more of a broader space within Southwest Africa or East Africa that we originate in. What we see is that area is very heavy in sun, and so we speciate darker skin, and then we have this ability within our skin to adapt our skin tone depending on the environment. All of his people would have looked like him. But the denting in his face, no. But the skin color and the eye color, it is understood that he belonged to a group of people who looked like this. And in fact, it is understood that Scandinavia was settled by two groups of people, one who looks like Cheddarmen and one who is dark of skin or dark of eye and light of skin, which the Sami are still dark of eye and light of skin, but they're darker of skin than the Scandinavians who descend from the people that Cheddarmen come from. My education, archaeology and anthropology, and medicine. I did medicine before I did archaeology and anthropology. Horses don't come from lighter skinned Aryans. So horses come from Turtle Island, and they cross a land bridge into the steppes of Eurasia. And so they really come from the Eurasian steppes, which isn't Aryan, it's more Siberian. The image behind me is Cheddarman. This is a reconstruction based on his skull from Kinnis and Kinnis and his genetics. So what we see is that as Homo sapiens are moving up into Europe, again, we see this movement up starts around 54,000 years ago as the ice is receding. We don't see Homo sapiens moving into Scandinavia until about 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, when the ice is fully receded in this area. 7,000 years ago, I think is the latest dating. And when we see this, we see even Scandinavia being settled by two groups of people, one being dark skinned and light eyed, like Cheddarmen, whose people settled Britain and who looked like him, and one being dark of eye and light of skin, having come over from the Siberian steppes, the Finno-Ugric language people. We see that it takes a few thousand years to get to the point of light skin. So it takes 100 generations to adapt, and that is 2,500 years currently. And so what we're seeing is that so if you're looking at Britain at 10,000 years ago, 300 generations between here and now, we're looking at 2,500 years. So about 7.5 thousand years ago in Britain, you're looking at roughly a quarter of the population is light skinned. By 5,000 years ago in Britain, you're looking at roughly half of the population is light skinned. By 2,000 years ago in Britain and in Scandinavia, you're looking at roughly 80-90% of the population. No, 70-80% of the population is light skinned. And even at 10 that are at 1,000 years ago in the sagas, we are seeing that roughly 10% of the population is dark of skin. We see that Egil from the sagas is dark of skin. We see actually several people written about in the sagas that are dark of skin. We actually see that there are Viking age burials in Britain and in Scandinavia that have African descent people within them as well. So we're definitely seeing a population that has a multitude of color within it. But even within people who have lived in that space for a couple hundred generations, you are still seeing dark skin being very prevalent. And it is important to note that even today in Scandinavia, 4C hair is extremely common. Like 4C hair happens frequently. I've known a lot of people from Scandinavia with 4C hair. And we actually see 4C hair in the Irish population as well as in the Celtic population. And again, what we're looking at is that most of Europe at this time is pretty dark and predominantly dark of skin. It takes quite a bit to get to the point where we're seeing lighter skin. As an Aussie, I confirm that a cassowary will raise you first. I believe that. So the Australian, Indigenous Australian people, there's evidence that they were collecting eggs to hatch an imprint so that they could raise cassowaries for defense and for maybe hunting purposes. 4C hair. Uh, the theory of race invented the scale of hair that we use today, and the scale of hair rates hair texture from 1A to 4C. And really, what it is the shape of the follicle of the hair dictates the level of curl of the hair. If it is an extremely round follicle, it is extremely curly. And if it's extremely flat, it's extremely straight, though I may have them backwards. I'm pretty sure that's it, though. And it actually, it's a whole scale. Before C hair is the extremely tight curl that we associate with Afro hair or African hair, but hair that will create an afro. Widow works. Widow works best. I, try not to put my real name out in public as much anyways, but Widow is actually a name that I use across most things. Widow is more of a titler than anything else. Thank you, asked Carla. I wasn't sure, like, because my mind will drop them sometimes. Um, so that's pretty much all of my conversation for tonight. Coming this next week, there is a bunch of websites that I have bookmarked over the last couple of years that I'm going to bring in and start discussing over the next couple of weeks. In my contacts in the indigenous community within Turtle Island, are you looking to know what my protocol is, or are you asking for help? Oh, content. Oh, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure what we were looking for at that point. Absolutely superstar. And I've talked to a few. I just like my mind will flip it. Oh, of course are fine. Yeah. But I actually know a lot of beauticians who use different ratings. I think we need to have a different way that we're rating it anyways, because what we're rating it out of currently is steeped within racism. But I've heard a couple different. Yeah. Well, and it's because it starts in the 30s and 40s. Because it starts when you see so when you start to see the theory of eugenics really starting to get into play within Nazi Germany and early apartheid and race segregation within the United States is when you really start to see that scale. It's also when we start to see the skin color charts and the eye color charts really coming into play. Again, that whole justification for atrocity, right? Yeah. Historic, prehistoric emu on ice. The cassowaries. Let me show a picture of the cassowaries. Uh, Actually, there's this little baby one in this article, and it's really, really cute. So I'm going to show you a little baby cassowary first. KYA means thousands of years ago. So 18,000 years ago would be indigenous Australians raising baby cassowaries. Here's a baby cassowary. And then 5,000 years ago, as when you're seeing roughly 50% of the population of Europe starting to be light of skin. Here is an adult cassowary. These are huge, huge birds that can be very, very vicious. Well, I was going by tight curl. um, which I've known people to have extremely tight curl without it being really coarse, and I've known people to have extremely straight hair that's pretty coarse, so I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I have heard of the dream time, I know about the dream time, but I wouldn't know enough, and to my understanding, dream time is more of a spiritual thing, and I don't touch on people's spiritual practices. Okay. I always love the conversations that are happening in my chat. They can be extremely interesting. Um, I had heard it differently, yeah. I don't have articles pulled up on it because it's not really the discussion that I usually have. I do know, and in the articles they stated as 4C hair, but I do know that the belief in anthropology done by latest studies done by Black anthropologists who did hair prior to anthropology or had knowledge in hair actually decided that, or the studies show that this is actually the speciation of Homo sapien with that hair, which she states in the article is 4C, because of the fact that it creates a lattice work on top of the scalp and therefore gives airflow, which cools the scalp. And that's why there's a belief of why Homo sapien was speciated with 4C hair. Allioparenting, Gabriella, if you could tell me what that means, I would be able to talk about it. I'm still here at least for another half an hour. So I am going to be going live Tuesdays and Friday mornings, Pacific Standard Time at 8 a.m. and Wednesday and Sunday nights, Pacific Standard Time at 8 p.m. We've talked about early medicine a few times here. What information changed, Chili? Yeah. Do you know what your ancestry is? Do you know who your ancestors are? It's all about, um, you know, your skin color isn't your culture unless you make it your culture. Now, for specific groups of people, their skin color can be their culture because of the experience that's shared because of that skin color. Okay. I.e., Black people in America who have gone through the slave trade experience or their ancestors have gone through the slave trade experience. This is a shared experience that creates a shared culture. And because of the ripping from ancestry and ripping from home and the loss of knowledge of family and lines, it's a very specific shared instance that creates an entire culture of its own because it took away the other culture, right? Um, so in that instance, skin color is culture because it's about the experience that that culture uh, has developed from that skin color because of the racism and the structure in the United States. But as a white person, your culture is not your skin color. You can be American and that can be your culture. Um, you can be capitalist and that can be your culture. You can be European and that can be your culture. You can have Scandinavian descent, or ancestry or Scottish ancestry, and that can be your culture, though in that case you'd have Celtic culture because Scottish is a nationality. Um, but, finding connection to ancestry is important for everybody. That disconnect creates a space that is lost within you, right? And creates a lack of community within you. And that lack of community creates loneliness and it creates pain and it creates suffering within you. So, I mean, do you, but I would state that if you're tired, if you're hurting, finding your own history and your own culture and acknowledging that other people have history and culture is an early step to finding a way through it. Absolutely, short. Absolutely. Because of the fact that that is why specifically Black is culture within the United States. Because when your parents are ripped from you and you have no clue what your ties to your history are, this becomes a cultural center, right? They're still slaughtering each other, Danny. We like to think of the United States as being the only place that's been colonized, but let's be real. Wales has been fighting colonization since 1395. Scotland has been fighting colonization since about 1200. Ireland has been fighting colonization since about 1000. The Sami are still fighting colonization. The Sami were put in residential schools. Uh, there are so many. I knew people in Japan. There are so many people around the globe still fighting colonization, right? Colonization has been a very global phenomenon, and there are very many groups of indigenous people around the globe still fighting to retain autonomy and nationhood and sovereignty and tending of their space, right? Yes, ready. And I probably butchered the pronunciation, unfortunately. Melungeon people, if my memory serves, the Melungeon people are a group of mixed, like a group of mixed cultures, who've created a new culture, if I remember correctly. Yes, it's a mixture of 3 different cultures kinda combining in a space and becoming a culture, kinda like Akkadian becomes a culture as well, kinda like Creole becomes a culture as well. They're all different cultural heritages. The Industrial Revolution has caused the acceleration of appropriation and cultural decay. Currently, the only recognized indigenous people in Ireland are the Romani, to my knowledge. Is that what you were talking about, Razzle, at Gabrielle? I missed the at what Gabrielle was saying though, unless that's what it was. But absolutely, I do believe that the only recognized indigenous people in Ireland are the Romani people. Uh, I do know that part of Ireland has decolonized, like has overthrown the yoke of Britain, right? But part of Ireland has not, right? And I have known people from both space. Hi, Obsidian. And people in both space, still believe in the fight for sovereignty and maintenance of control, right? Oh, okay, Katie, I wasn't sure. But yeah, to my understanding, the only acknowledged indigenous people within Ireland are the Romani people currently. But the Celtic people are indigenous people of Ireland who have been fighting to overthrow colonization for 1,000 years, and um, can trace that indigeneity. And there are several groups within Ireland who are still fighting to overthrow that outside colonization, right? The people considered Black Irish. Um, there's several different forms of Black Irish. Black Irish can just be very dark of hair. Uh, but there are also, East African heritages in Ireland. We also know that the Irish people document themselves as, having come across from, you know, so when you look at the Celtic migration pattern, you're seeing the Celtic migration pattern coming across the lower Mediterranean and coming up. And then Scotia, who comes up and through, is supposed to be the daughter of an Egyptian princess, or the daughter of an Egyptian king, pharaoh. So Africans. So we're seeing that there's a lot of mix of global cultural mix that goes on continuously for a long period of time. We like to think that all of these places are very insular, but they've never been insular. They've always mixed quite a bit. They've always had a lot of influx from other cultures. Yes, and that's really what it is you can get very dark, or you can just get, like, very fair skin with very dark hair, and both are considered to be Black Irish. Very dark of skin, very dark of hair is considered Black Irish, and then very light of skin with very dark of hair, and often with blue eyes, and that last one is considered to be Black Irish as well. So the Spanish people are fair, just stating. The Spanish people are Celts. The Iberian Peninsula is a Celtic domain. There is a period of time where the Moors come up from Africa, and the Islamic Moors dominate the Iberian Peninsula. This is in northern Africa, dominating the Iberian Peninsula for a period of time. But the Spanish people are blonde haired and blue eyed, typically, right? There is that influx of the Moorish group for a while that will lead to some darker skinned Spanish people. But typically, Spanish people are Celtic people and they're light of skin and light of eye. The Vikings, so the Scandinavian people, Scandinavia is settled at 7,000 years ago by two groups of people, one that looks like the man behind me, and one who is dark of eye and light of skin, which would be the Sami people today. Um, we see that roughly 2,000 years ago, you're looking at, maybe 70% of the population in Scandinavia is light of skin. But even in the sagas, we see Egil as documented as being dark of skin. There are several people within the sagas documented as dark of skin, and we see that dark skin is roughly 10% of the population of Scandinavia, even at 1,000 years ago. And this is going to be the same with early Germanic tribes because the Germanic people are the people that settle part of Scandinavia. So the dark skinned, blue eyed people that go up into Scandinavia are Germanic. The light skinned, dark eyed people that go up into Scandinavia are the Finno Ugric people that end up being the Finns and the Sami people. What is my take on Asian and Turtle Island indigenous people having similar characteristics? So it's been proven that so indigenous Australians are out of Africa at 65 to 70,000 years ago in indigenous Australia, in Australia. Everybody else is out at 50,000 years ago. And this is out of the Levant area. It takes about 10 to 15,000 years of moving through Asia to get to Turtle Island. And currently we're looking at there's probably a southern boat route, which I thought for years, but they're currently doing articles on a southern boat route, and this is coming through because of Denisovian DNA within Turtle Island indigenous people pre-colonization. So what we're looking at is this similarity is because you're moving through the same space to get to a different space, right? And people are staying behind. You also will see that the X1 mitochondrial DNA is here in Turtle Island, and the X2 mitochondrial DNA is in Siberia. And if you look, They're both in northern climes and they both come from that Arctic Circle region where X1 DNA here in Turtle Island probably migrated back through and gave that X2 DNA to Siberia because X2 comes from X1. That's that 2 portion of it. That's 130,000 years ago, Ketrovin. And there is a link for the Cerruti Mastodon find, which is what you were talking about there, in my bio. But that would not be Homo sapiens. That would be Homo erectus. That would be the ghost species that's in Turtle Island indigenous DNA. It would also give weight to Turtle Island indigenous people being created here as they speciated here from Homo erectus and then bred with Homo sapien when Homo sapien gets here by all evidence. And I believe it could be the giants that has been talked about and the giant bones that were found here in Turtle Island. Racism is absolutely possible. Racism is not the social construct. Race is the social construct. It's a colonial construct. Racism absolutely is part of the social construct. But racism can be possible without race existing because racism is something that was created, just like race was something that was created and we're still living within it. So, my understanding obsidian of haplogroups and all knowledge of what I'm told of haplogroups is that when you look at so like X1 and X2, X is your originator, and then X1 is the originator from X, and then X2 comes from X1. So you see this also with L1, L2, and L3 in Africa. You see where L becomes M. Okay. And then you see where M becomes N and O, right? And so these haplogroups, as they move out alphabetically, what they do is they alphabetically them, right? And then they trace them back to the mitochondrial eve of that haplogroup, the original originator of that haplogroup. But the first haplogroup, the original haplogroup is the one haplogroup. The two haplogroup is going to be a descendant from the one haplogroup. So if it's X1 here in Turtle Island and X2 is in Siberia, all understanding of mitochondrial DNA tells us that it is the one that's the originator. So, did giants exist? I don't know. Do I believe they exist? Yes. Um, all the giant finds that we found here in Turtle Island were found between the late 1700s and the early 1900s. This is a time when archaeology is grave robbing. It's not actual archaeology as we know it today. And because archaeology at this time is grave robbing and not actually archaeology as we know it today, none of it's really documented as well as it can be. And none of it stays where it should. So the bones go to people's closets and people's attics and people's collections. So there's articles written of the giants. We've found giant skeletons all over the globe, but we've found the highest concentration within Turtle Island. There's like 24 of them within Turtle Island that have been found. Then almost all of them have been found in mound burials. Again, these are articles written between the 1700s and the early 1900s. I think 1930, 1940 is the last one. Um, Trying to get to any of these articles is difficult because most of them have not been digitized. Some that have are behind paywalls. Um, we'd have to find the bones to have proof, right? To have that definitive proof that they actually exist and they're not just somebody's forgery. But I do believe that they could exist. There's conversation of them existing throughout history. There's Herodotus writes of giants, and Herodotus writes of finding giant skeletons, right? So there is conversation of them existing throughout history, and there is conversation within Turtle Island indigenous histories of giants as well. And so it's a possibility. Um, it's a possibility. Do I believe do I have facts? No. Do I have proof? No, but it is my belief, right? And again, those bones end up in somebody's basement, somebody's attic. We're talking at a time when George Washington documents watching an indigenous burial, the burial of a woman, a young woman. And as soon as the indigenous group walks away from that burial site, going out and digging it up and taking it home with him. That's what early archaeology was. Oh, this is really cool. I'm going to put it on a shelf and display it for everyone to see. Right. So this is not my theory. This is my hypothesis. There's a difference between theory and hypothesis. Theory is proven by fact. Hypothesis is an idea based on evidence. But until I've actually tested it, it's still just a hypothesis. And again, I stated this is my hypothesis and that there is no testing ability behind it, right? Do I believe? Yes. Do you believe in God? Right? Do I believe? I'm allowed to believe. Do I have evidence? No. I'm not stating I have evidence. I'm stating that there is a lot of evidence out there, but that I'd have to have bones to prove that they weren't a fraud. And the likelihood is extremely low because white people suck when they do archaeology. We can definitively say that it's not Homo sapiens who would have been the Cerruti mastodon find. And this is why we can definitively say that it would not be Homo sapiens doing their Cerruti mastodon find, because Homo sapiens have not made it out of the Levant area yet. We can also state that Homo erectus had what we call island giganticism and island dwarfism, like every other species, because Homo erectus uses island dwarfism to turn into Homo florensis, the hobbit species, and Homo lozensis, the dwarf species. And so it is just as likely that they would have used island giganticism and island dwarfism to become a giant species in a space where there's an exorbitant amount of megafauna, because we have more megafauna in Turtle Island than anywhere else on the globe because of island giganticism. So if Homo erectus made it here and speciated here, the likelihood is that they would have speciated as a gigantic species, just like they speciated as a small species with island dwarfism in the Indonesian island of Flores and in the Philippines island of Lozones. So likelihood states, but again, until we have bones, we got jack shit, right? Lictish tools, Ducray. I'm actually gold. The social constructs we have now would not have existed back then. They're new social constructs. Thank you, monster. Oh. Have you read the articles on it, Ducray? I'd go and read the articles on it. They did experimental archaeology on it, and it actually, for me, the most evidence lies in the bones because of the fact that the crackage only happens with fresh bones and because of the way the bones are cracked, right? Um, but the Cerruti mastodon finds are in my link tree. Okay. Okay. Maybe we should discuss it one of these days. I'm not talking with certainty. Does that mean that I know a lot? Just asking. It is true that blue eyes comes first. Absolutely. I can prove almost everything that I espouse. Somebody asked me if I believed something existed, and I stated that yes, I believed it existed. There's a difference between first of all, I'm allowed to have my opinion and believe whatever the flying fuck I want. If I wanna believe the spaghetti monster exists, I can believe this spaghetti monster exists. I'm not telling you to believe in it. I'm stating that, yes, I believe it exists. You believe God exists, I don't. But you can believe in it. Nobody's telling you can't believe in it. People are telling you not to force your belief on other people. It's rude and obnoxious. But nobody's telling you not to believe in God. You're more than welcome to believe in God. And I have more evidence in the existence of giants than you have in the existence of God. The only thing that you have in evidence is the existence of God is a book written to control your ass. I at least have a multitude of articles and the possibility of bones. People believe in God. Why can't I believe giants exist? I didn't write a thesis paper on it. I'm not putting it before an archaeological board, and I'm not telling you an archaeological certainty that yes, it exists. I'm saying, sure, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. So many things in this world are possible, boo boo. So many things in this world. When you eliminate possibility of things that are even probable, what the heck, right? More probable that there were giants than there was your God. It's way more probable, excuse me, way more probable that my giants exist than your God exists. But you want to tell me that there's something wrong with that? It's not a cop out. I'm telling you accountability. I don't know for certain, but sure, I believe of it. That's accountability. Diametrically, diametrically opposed to a cop out. Just saying. RH negative, RH positive. The RH factor. So first of all, ABO blood type is the antigens around your blood. It's not the actual blood. And the RH is another type for blood types. That's the antigens around your blood. There are 49 antigens for RH. And if you do not have the RH capital D, then you are RH negative. You still have the other 48 RH things. Basically, what we're looking at is an allergen, right? What we're looking at is your body treating it as an allergen. The first pregnancy is fine. It's the second pregnancy that you have an allergic reaction to this infestation, basically. So, RH factor really doesn't play in as much as people want it to, right? Good night. Good night. Spaghetti monster did exist until I put it in my tummy. I'm not a spaghetti person, so but yeah. Okay, we've got about 6 more minutes and I'm gonna take off. So if RH null is totally different. There's only 49 people on the planet that are RH null, and it's like they don't have any of the RH factor. It's considered golden blood. But um, if you're A positive, it means you're RH positive. If you're A negative, it means you're RH negative. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, RH null is considered golden blood. There's like 49 people, maybe it's 35 people, and I'm getting it mixed up with the RH antigens, which is absolutely possible. It's numbers in my head. But there's very few people, like under 50 people on the planet that have RH null blood, and it's considered golden blood. B positive means you're RH positive. The positive negative. So ABO is a blood types, right? And you can be AB, right? But A, B, and O are the blood types. And then the positive and negative after your type is whether your RH factor is. I don't know why you think I agree that there's no such thing as a patriarchy. I don't know what I said that makes you think that. I don't know how they figure out somebody is RH null. I think it's a When they're testing their blood, they find no Rh antigens in their blood. There's Black people with white features today. Race doesn't exist. Features are pretty global. They don't really have anything to do with anything, with the exception of a couple. Like the fold in the inner corner of the eye has to do with the reflection of sun off of snow, and so you see it in Arctic regions. Oh, because clearly women being in early church means patriarchy is debunked. Oh, absolutely. Uh, okay, so here's the thing. Patriarchy doesn't mean men lead, and matriarchy doesn't mean women lead. Patriarchy and matriarchy distinguish how familial lines are passed and where you belong in a family structure. There are matriarchies where men lead, like Celtic matriarchies, frequently men led were kings, but a man's son would not follow him. His sister's son would follow him because it was a matrilineal line, right? Um, there is a huge difference between toxic patriarchy and toxic matriarchy and matriarchy. Toxic patriarchy is what we are currently living in. A toxic patriarchy states that the other perceived gender is less. Whereas a positive patriarchy acknowledges that both perceived genders or multiple perceived genders are valid and all have uh, weight in a ruling, and I'll have weight in a judgment. That's the difference between a toxic patriarchy and a patriarchy. But patriarchy and matriarchy are just lineages and how you deem family lines are passed and where you deem elders have the most weight generally. So you might see that in a matriarchy, women have more leadership roles than men do, but men are still leading. You might see in a patriarchy that's positive where men have more leadership roles, but women are still leading, right? It's called golden blood. They just call it golden blood. It's not that it's actually golden, but RH null is considered golden blood, and it's because it can go to anybody. It's a universal donor is why it's considered the golden blood, but it's not gold. It's just called golden blood. Yes, so golden blood is used for any blood type in a transfusion is why they call it golden blood. Okay, so I am out. Did you call me an Edomite? Really? Nobody, it's not that you can receive, it's that you can give to. Golden blood, so RH null is considered golden blood. There's only, and I think it's 35. Let me look. RH null is 1 in 6 million individuals, 43. 43 people on Earth have ever been reported to have it. There are only 9 active donors. It is considered golden blood because it can go to anyone. It's a universal doning blood. No, Rh negative is not the same as Rh null. Rh null does not have the Rh factors antigens at all. Rh negative is only missing 1. They just call it golden blood. Like that's what they call it. Like that's what it's called. I'm calling it what the scientists call it. Oh, is it? This is a totally different type. It's a totally different typing. It's totally different. Anyways, have a good one, guys. I know, right? Like, why are you calling me an Edomite like it's an insult? I'm not even sure what the hell you meant with that one. Have a great one, everybody. Have a great night. And I will be back. I'll be back Tuesday morning. Have a great one until Tuesday. And then I'll see everybody Wednesday night as well. So Tuesday morning, Pacific Standard Time at 8 a.m. and Wednesday night, Pacific Standard Time at 8 p.m. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody. You will have a great time. Enjoy yourselves. I saw this getting ready for a live, but I wanted to comment because I love this comment. Many Gen Xers seem to really love the fact that we are so independent and we, survived so early on. I know for me, it was often one of those things that I was really proud of and still I'm really proud of my ability to survive my resilience right independence from such a young age. I remember being like 3 years old and taking care, like I said, this was 4 issues for when I was 3 years, 12 months, taking care of my infant sister in the back of the car while my parents were out dating. So I totally love this. I was told so often by my parents' generation better world or to make a better place or to give better to the next generation. And I love that we are independent and I love that we have a high rate of survival. We're really good at those survival skills, but I wish we had had a childhood. I wish we had had the ability to be children. There's so much knowledge that we have now that tells us that our brain's ability to function um, is directly related to the extended period of childhood and this extended periods of development that tend to get fucked up when trauma or forced survival at a young age. Now, don't get me wrong, taking care of my sister was absolutely, I loved her and she was my doll. I thought I was her mother when she was born, for real. Um, and I absolutely believe that children should be partaking in the family structure. They should do chores. They should partake in the life they're going to have to partake in as adults and learn it, right? With kindness and love and at a skill level. But, I think that the expectation for us to